Um, so the last time I sat and spoke to you, I said that I was a little bit worried because I was kind of running out of models to discuss. At the end of the day, as some wag once said, a tank is a tank is a tank, and we've almost been through all the models with these series of talks but out of the blue, because this is how things work in the Cartier world, I've actually got 3 videos lined up to make and the first one is going to be the watch in here. Now, over the course of my life, I have had various things, pieces of jewelry, clocks or boxes, or watches that I've known that Cartier has made and have never been able to find, and it is incredibly annoying when there's something that you sort of hanker after and it just never turns up. And about 10 years ago, out of the blue, one of these watches turned up, and it just so happened that at that time there was a very, very lovely woman I know whose husband had a special birthday coming up, and she had asked me to find her something really unusual and really unique that her husband did not have, and she wanted it for this birthday. So as soon as this watch turned up, I was so excited. I immediately called her and said, God, guess what? I got something amazing. Your husband hasn't got it. And she came rushing around. She took one look at this watch, said, it's fabulous, it's great, boom. And it was gone. It was only sort of after it was gone and those sort of things had calmed down. I realized what a clot I'd been, because here was my great moment to own this watch, and it had literally slipped out of my hands. But I couldn't be more happy because she was delighted and he was delighted. And I thought actually another one would turn up. I mean, these watches do turn up, but actually one didn't turn up until very, very recently, which is a good 10 years later, and actually it was the only second model of this watch that I had ever seen. I'm talking about this watch. This is a vintage. I'm really into, we must be careful not to stray into the modern reproduction watches, which Cartier does a very good job with, I may add, but I'm talking about the originals. This actually is a watch from 1936. So one did turn up, and by a strange quirk, a very charming American collector called me up and said, listen, I expect that you bought this watch at auction. And I said I did, and he said, I've been dying to have this watch, and would you ever consider selling it to me? And I said, well, I would, and we talked and talked and talked, and we finally came to an arrangement. And I was very happy actually that he had it, because he's a man of great sophistication. He's very interested by Cartier and the whole Cartier story, very interested by the watches and all the minutiae of the watches. And anyhow, we agreed. So I'm going to show you this watch. He's very graciously allowed me to make this video. And I'm now going to show you the second model of this watch, which has now been in my hands and slipped away very quickly. Now, this watch was originally called a parallelogram. It's now more commonly known as the Asymétrique. And so far as we know, there were only 6 of these models made. I think there were 5 made 1936, 1937, and 1 made a little bit later, 1939. And this is really is one of the true rarities of the Cartier stable. Now, basically speaking, I mean, this is a tank. I mean, you know, it's a tank, but tanks did go through changes. There were curved tanks, there were elongated tanks, there were thinned down tanks, there were square tanks. They went through a lot of changes within the confines of it being a tank, which means they have to have these parallel lines either side. But this is probably the most radical transformation they went to, when they just skewed it by about 30% off the square. Now, on the wrist, I'm going to show you something which is quite nice, because on the wrist it looks quite elegant and chic and unusual, and I think it is really one of the most amazing watches simply because of the design. And I wonder what did cross Cartier's mind when they thought about making these things. But what we never really can get our hands on is the actual thought process, the creative process that Cartier went through with anything, with their jewels, their clocks, and their watches, anything. We can never be on site to understand what was going on in the designers' minds. But it is very clever. Francesca Brickell says that her grandfather told her that this was a driving watch, but when you're driving, the thing is, I'm not absolutely sure that when you're driving, here we are, I'm now driving my mythical car. I don't really see that it makes a lot of difference having it off center like this. But that was what she'd heard, and her facts are very, very important. But I think that what I'm going to try and show you a little bit now is that the Cartier, to talk about the Cartier tank watches, if we look in the chronology of tank watches, you can see that we started off with the Tank Normale in 1919. And the first big change after that was a Chinoise. And then there was a Tank LC named after Louis Cartier. Then there was the Allongé, obviously elongated. And then there was a little one, a tiny one. And then there was the Centré, which is really the king of Cartier watches, the very big curved watch. And then we move across here to the Tank Guichet. Now we're getting into 1928. That's the tank which had the solid dial with holes to show the times. I'm not actually sure what a shaped baguette tank is, but it's a model of the tank introduced in 1931. Tank Étanché, which is I think that is a waterproof one. Tank 8 days. Again, this is a very rare watch, 8 days. The Savonnette, the one which has a cover on it. The Basculant, the one which actually you can turn right over and hide. And then in 1936 comes the Tank Asymétrique. So it was the last major change to the tank watch. And after that, there were no other variations. The variations that remained within this range. What is quite interesting, I don't know whether you've noticed, what is quite interesting in this is that it doesn't have a D buckle. Now, the fellow who now is the lucky owner of this watch called me up at some point and said to me, I've been doing all this research on the asymmetric, and every photograph I find in any archive photograph of Cartier, the asymmetric is not on a D buckle, it is on a pin buckle. So we looked and looked and looked, and he said, do you think you can find me an old Cartier pin buckle? And I said to him, no, we'll never do that, but we can make you one. So actually what we've done is that we've made him a pin buckle. Exactly as the original Cartier one. And we've made a strap too, which if you look through these books, it can show you can see there, for example, is the same strap. It was actually a pigskin or calfskin strap with white stitching. I love these straps. We're, I think, one of the few people actually who can have these made today. But so the idea was that for this particular collector was the watch is as authentic in looks today as it was then. There are a few, there's another one, which is very similar. You'll see this has gold sword hands, whereas this one has blued. That's a process they use to color the steel, blued steel hands, but it has the same dial configuration. I quite like, you see, this is where Cartier was clever. You see, look, it's got a little tiny dot above the 6 and a tiny dot below. So that is purely decorative, and I like that. It's quite clever. This watch is similar. It has different hands. It has breguet hands, and then what we will notice as well is that this watch here has got an extra lug in the middle. Now, in the 6 watches that Cartier made, there are very few photographs of them. All the photographs are basically of the same 3 watches. And so I can't tell how many had the extra lug. Now, in my view, the one without the extra lug is much the nicest. It's by far the purest. It's just the tank skewed off in the asymmetric form and no mucking about. You can see from this book here that actually as they reintroduced the watch, it was again in the late 50s, they actually added more lugs to it, which I think is just distracting. So I think that this watch to me is the optimum. While we're talking about specifics, if you look at the side of the watch, I know that we have discussed case screws before. Cartier always had 2 case screws. I mean 4 actually. There were 2 on either side, and then screws for the strap. Now, what's interesting in this watch, they're done away with. I think that probably Cartier felt that the offsetting was enough to define it, didn't need any extraneous decoration. It does have a sort of eagle beak lug here. Without the screw, that means the eagle has no eye, but it gives the same effect of sitting on your wrist. It's all been rounded in a very nice, smooth way. And what is particularly interesting in this watch, is, apart from the offset, is that the winder, as you can see in both these pictures, the winder is recessed. Now, Cartier's great claim to fame with all of his watches was the cabochon sapphire winder. We'd take this page, for example, you see they've all got a cabochon sapphire winder. This was a very major design statement for Cartier, but in this watch, they did exactly the opposite. They recessed it, so it's a very pure silhouette. And I think, again, it just goes back to the fact that probably what they wanted to do was just to make the statement, or design the statement, or decorative statement, remain just with the offset. And so I think that what is interesting is that here is a tank. Here is one of the great Cartier designs. And I'm just actually wondering what else I need to tell you about this watch, other than the fact that they were made in this period. The 1930s were a really golden era. Before the Second World War, the world it recovered from the recession. The world was again a rich and a happy place. This watch was made at a time when Cartier was really booming. Actually, fine enough, especially Cartier London was booming, but Cartier Paris was booming. And these watches, I would imagine, sold very quickly. Unfortunately, we do not know the story. We don't know the life this watch has led. But one thing we do know for a fact is that it has been treasured. Now, these watches, this isn't 100 years old, 36 to now, it's 80 or 90 years old. It's in very good condition. This has been treasured all these years. And I think that what is nice is that the new home it's going to, it will be equally treasured. And that is important for our understanding going forward in the future of what Cartier was achieving, which was all about beauty, elegance, and chicness. With all 3 things which are hard to find today, I think.